The 1980s may have been the decade that kept the muscle car dream alive, but not every machine from that era aged like fine wine. But some of these cars turned out to be bad deals, and in 2025, they're just not worth buying. Number 20, 1980 Dodge Aspen RT. If you are thinking about buying an old car today, do not waste your money on the 1980 Dodge Aspen RT. Back in the day, people thought it might be cool, but soon they found out it was full of problems. Today, it is just a bad car to own. The biggest problem? Rust. The Aspen RT rusted very fast. In places with rain, snow, or salty roads, the metal started to break down. The body would flake, and the parts underneath would rot. This was not just ugly, it was dangerous. Fixing the rust cost a lot of money, and many people gave up trying. The car also drove badly. It came with the slant 6 engine. That engine was known to last a long time, but it was not strong or fast. It was a 225 cubic inch 6-cylinder engine that felt very weak. When you pressed the gate, it barely moved. The engine and the automatic transmission also acted strangely. It was like the car did not want to go. The inside was not much better. Yes, it had power windows and locks, but the seats were not comfortable. The inside felt cheap. After some time, the dashboard cracked, the doors squeaked, and parts started to fall apart. It did not feel like a car made with care. It felt like a car made from leftover parts. Even the outside was boring. It had a plain, boxy shape. While other cars from the 80s looked fun and exciting, the Aspen RT looked like a dull brick on wheels. And then there were the recalls. The company had to fix many parts. That means too many things were wrong. In the end, this car is not fun, not fast, and not worth your money today. Number 19, 1980 Chevrolet Monza. The 1980 Chevrolet Monza is a big letdown. Almost everything about it is weak, slow, or just plain disappointing. Let's start with the power. The base model came with a tiny 151 cubic inch 4-cylinder engine that only made 87 horsepower. That's barely enough to move a car, let alone one pretending to be sporty. If you wanted more power, the V8 option gave you just 110 horsepower. Even worse, the California version had a big 350 cubic inch V8, but it only made 125 horsepower. That's not muscle, that's a snooze. And when it came to moving fast, forget it. The V8 version took more than 12 seconds just to reach 60 miles per hour. Its main rival, the Ford Mustang II, did it in under 10 seconds. The Monza's quarter-mile time was a slow 19 seconds flat. Drivers wanted fun and speed, but instead got stuck with a car that felt lazy and dull. Additionally, steering and handling didn't help either. Even though it was light, the Monza didn't like turns. It felt floaty and hard to control, especially on twisty roads. The suspension and steering were not sharp at all. It had 4-wheel disc brakes, which sounded good, but they couldn't save the driving experience from feeling sloppy. Looks didn't win anyone over either. It came as a 2-door coupe or a 3-door hatchback, but neither version looked exciting. Big plastic bumpers made it look bulky and cheap. The cabin used basic materials that felt rough and dull, with nothing special to enjoy or remember. Chevrolet had big plans for a rotary engine, but that never happened. Instead, they stuck the Monza with weak engines and leftover parts from the Chevrolet Vega, another failure. All that effort, and the Monza still couldn't keep up. Number 18, 1980 Buick Century Turbo Coupe. Back in the late 1970s, Buick tried something bold with the Century Turbo Coupe. What they got instead was a strange mix of awkward design, missed chances, and flashy graphics that couldn't save the car. Under the sharp, fastback shape was a 232 cubic inch V6 engine with a single turbocharger and one 4-barrel carburetor. That setup gave it 175 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. But with no manual transmission offered, it never felt exciting to drive. Buick left all the fun out of a car that really needed some. It did weigh just over 3,051 pounds, which helped it move better than expected, but not enough to impress buyers. Its closest rivals still had more power and better performance. Even the base 1979 Chevrolet Corvette was quicker and sounded far better doing it. However, from the bird sticker on the fender to the giant Turbo Coupe label on the back, the look screamed for attention. But bucket seats and a sport steering wheel weren't enough to match the promises the body made. Number 17, 1981, Dodge Marada CMX. Never heard of the 1981 Dodge Marada CMX? You're not the only one. And if you're thinking about buying one today, don't. This forgotten car from the 80s is one of the worst choices you could make. The Marada CMX tried to mix muscle and luxury, but it failed at both. It had shiny chrome, a vinyl top, and even a leather steering wheel. Some even had glass T-tops, which looked cool, but that's where the fun ended. Once you drove it, the magic disappeared fast. Under the hood, it had a 318 cubic inch V8 engine. Sounds strong? Not at all. It only made about 130 horsepower. That's not nearly enough for a car this heavy. It was super slow. Hit the ground, and instead of a roar, you got a sad groan. It was like watching a tired turtle climb a hill. Then, the 3-speed automatic transmission, called Torque Flight, was just okay. Nothing fancy. You could get the shifter on the steering column or the center console, depending on the seat setup. Bucket seats gave you a brushed aluminum dashboard. But if you had a bench seat, you got fake wood trim that looked cheap and fake. Outside, it had a long nose and a short rear, kind of like a Cadillac Seville. But the front grille looked weird, almost like an old car from the 1930s. Even the sporty CMX model couldn't hide its clunky style. It wanted to look fast, but it just looked confused. Dodge even asked Richard Petty to race it, but it was so bad in the wind tunnel that it was 8 miles per hour slower than others. Sales dropped fast from about 27,000 to only 5,000 by 1983. Today, it's slow, awkward, and totally worthless. Number 16, 1980 Pontiac Firebird Turbo Trans Am. The 1980 Pontiac Firebird Turbo Trans Am was hiding a lot of problems under all that muscle. This car kept a big, heavy body weighing 3,700 pounds, but came with a small 302 cubic inch V8 engine, though Pontiac called it a 301 to sound better. That engine was really meant for slow station wagons, not for a sporty ride. To add speed, Pontiac gave it a turbocharger. Sounds exciting, but it caused more trouble than it solved. The turbo gave 9 pounds per square inch of boost, which was a lot for regular 91 octane fuel. To stop the engine from braking, they added a knock sensor system that would pull back the spark timing. That made the engine weaker, not stronger. To protect the engine more, they dropped the compression ratio down to 7.5 to 1. Even with stronger parts like thicker bolts and special pistons, the power still felt flat. The engine didn't deliver smooth, strong power. It felt like a normal 350 cubic inch motor trying hard to pull a heavy load and failing. It didn't even have a boost gauge or a warning light, so drivers never knew when the turbo kicked in. The sound was just like the old, quiet V8 with a catalytic converter. There was no thrill, no whine, no kick. The turbo's boost ended at 4,000 revolutions per minute. After that, the power dropped fast. It took 8.2 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour and 16.7 seconds for the quarter mile. That was slower than the 1979 version by 1.5 seconds. Even the top speed dropped to 116 miles per hour. Worse, the turbo only came with an automatic transmission. The manual option? A weak 3-speed paired with a small V6. Sure, the brakes were strong and handling parts worked well, but the heart of the car just wasn't there anymore. Number 15, 1983 Dodge Rampage. The 1983 Dodge Rampage. This car seems like a good idea at first, until you actually try to use it. Because once you got behind the wheel, things went downhill fast. The Rampage had 2 doors, a little truck bed, and a low nose that copied the Dodge Omni. But it sat so low to the ground, you had to drop into it, not climb. Trying to load heavy stuff into the back felt more like a workout. And that small bed, it could barely carry tools or gear. It looked like a truck but worked like a toy. Under the cover, it had a 135 cubic inch engine. Depending on the version, it made between 83 and 96 horsepower. That was not enough. It took 10 seconds just to reach 60 miles per hour. And if you tried to tow anything, the engine groaned like it was ready to quit. Step into the cabin and things got worse. It was full of cheap plastic, strange knobs, and controls that made no sense. One lock worked like a bottle cap. Red carpets and striped seats faded fast in the sun and fell apart over time. Additionally, it had front-wheel drive, which was fine in the rain but didn't feel like a real truck. Dodge bragged about its colors and smooth ride, but nobody was fooled. Sales in 1983 were under 17,000. Even Richard Petty didn't touch it. That says it all. Number 14, 1980 Cadillac Seville Elegante, diesel V8. The 1980 Cadillac Seville Elegante diesel was more show than go, and today, that makes it a heavy and clumsy relic, not a ride worth reviving. Start with the weight. This thing came in at over 4,200 pounds, packed with metal, insulation, and gimmicks. But its 350 cubic inch diesel engine made just 105 horsepower. That's not enough muscle to move a beast this size with any confidence. Push the pedal, and all you get is noise and a slow crawl. At 70 miles per hour, it would rather take a nap than speed up. The quiet cabin helped hide the truth. Around town, it floated like a cloud, but get it on a highway and wind whistled through the A-pillar. At 75 miles per hour, the car groaned like it had been pushed too far. And then there were the gadgets, dozens of them. Automatic dimming lights, power everything, temperature buttons, CB radio, even a console made for 8-track tapes. But all those buttons and gizmos couldn't distract from weak steering, a stiff throttle, and poor road feel. Even the design was confusing. The steep front, mixed with a hunchback trunk, looked like 3 different cars glued together. Inside, odd trims didn't quite fit, and stitching stuck out in strange places. Yes, it had glow plugs for fast cold starts, but what good is quick starting when the car barely moves once it's running? So, this Seville is best left where it belongs, in old magazine pages. Number 13, 1986 Dodge Lancer Shelby. The 1986 Dodge Lancer Shelby is a complete letdown and one of the worst cars you could buy today. Let's talk about that turbo engine. It had a 135 cubic inch turbocharged engine. Sounds cool, right? But it broke a lot. The turbo would overheat and lose power. Sometimes it made the car feel tired and slow. It also had something called multi-port fuel injection. That sounded high-tech back then, but it caused more trouble than it was worth. The fuel injectors got clogged, and the car wouldn't run right. Then came the biggest nightmare, the head gasket. This important part keeps the engine sealed and running smoothly, but in the Lancer Shelby, it failed again and again. When that happened, the engine overheated and sometimes got ruined. It was costly to fix and left many owners angry and stuck. Some buyers chose a different engine, a 158 cubic inch version. That was even worse. It needed constant care. Oil changes, spark plugs, and timing belt checks were a must. If you skipped any of those, the engine could quit on you. Many drivers didn't know that, and their engines gave up way too soon. Even if the engine worked, the inside of the car felt cheap. Plastic parts rattled and squeaked, buttons came loose, air vents snapped. Some people even had to use tape to keep things together. Outside, things didn't get better. In cold places with salty roads, the car rusted fast. The metal around the wheels and doors turned brown and flaky. It looked bad and made the car weaker. And for fuel, it drank it like a truck. City driving was the worst. Number 12, 1985 Chevrolet Citation X11. The 1985 Chevrolet Citation X11 turned out to be a confusing mess. It tried to mix old parts with new ideas, and the result was full of problems. Start with the ride. It was rough. The suspension was old-fashioned and made every bump feel worse. Then came torque steer. When you stepped on the gas, the steering wheel pulled hard to one side. It was never fully fixed, and it made driving feel awkward and sometimes even unsafe. Now let's talk about the power. You had 2 engine choices. One was a 170 cubic inch V6 that made 115 horsepower. The other was a 152 cubic inch 4-cylinder with only 90 horsepower. Even with some tuning in the X11 version, it was still slow compared to real performance cars. It took about 9 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Not terrible, but far from exciting. The look didn't help much either. It came in 2-door versions only, either a sedan or a hatchback coupe. The two-door sedan looked strange and not sporty. The hatchback looked better, but still couldn't shake the bad image. Chevrolet added sporty touches like special graphics, blackout trim, a rear spoiler, and 14-inch wheels. But those were just dress-up parts. And then came the real trouble: build quality. The early Chevrolet Citations had poor fit and finish. Parts didn't line up well. Things felt cheap. People complained about many little problems, from loose parts to bad workmanship. Chevrolet rushed production to meet demand, and it showed. Number 11. 1982 Chevrolet Camaro Iron Duke. The 1982 Chevrolet Camaro Iron Duke is one of those cars that wear a powerful badge but carry nothing behind it. Chevrolet gave this third-generation Camaro a full redesign. They made it 450 pounds lighter, hoping it would be quicker and sharper. But none of that mattered once they dropped in the 153 cubic inch four-cylinder engine. That engine made just 90 horsepower, an amount more fitting for a lawn tractor than a muscle car. To make things worse, it came with a 3-speed automatic transmission. The result? It took nearly 20 seconds just to reach 60 miles per hour. That is not just slow, it is painfully slow. Even a school bus could pull ahead with ease. For a car meant to turn heads, this version only turned them in confusion. Buyers saw through it. Only 15% of all Camaro customers picked this weak engine. Most people went for the later IROC Z model, which had a much stronger 348 cubic inch V8 engine making 170 horsepower, almost double the power of the Iron Duke. By 1985, Chevrolet got the message and moved on to better engines, leaving this mistake behind. No matter how fresh the shape looked, the Iron Duke dragged it down. Number 10. 1980 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Turbo. When a car promises thunder but delivers a tired whisper, it leaves more than just tire marks. It leaves disappointment. The 1980 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Turbo is a perfect case. Weighing 3,700 pounds, this Firebird carried a small 301 cubic inch V8 engine. That engine was meant for station wagons, not for something wearing a flaming bird on its nose. Pontiac added a turbocharger to reach 205 horsepower, but it only made things worse. The turbo setup pushed boost pressure to 9 pounds per square inch, but instead of speed, it gave problems. The engine was not made to handle the pressure. To protect it, Pontiac had to install complicated electronics that constantly pulled back spark timing. That means just when the car needed strength, it lost it. Even the feel behind the wheel was underwhelming. The car didn't roar or surge forward. Instead, it acted like any average old V8. Pontiac even worked to make the turbo silent. No whoosh, no thrill, just dull hums. In numbers, the letdowns were clear. 0 to 60 miles per hour took 8.2 seconds. A quarter-mile run was 16.7 seconds at 86 miles per hour. Compared to the old 400 cubic inch Trans Am, it was 1.5 seconds slower and 10 miles per hour behind on top speed. After 4,000 revolutions per minute, the power simply faded. It was best left in automatic mode. Manual shifting made no difference. This turbo dream burned out long before the finish line. Number 9. 1984 Pontiac Fiero. Next up, some cars are all talk and no drive, and the 1984 Pontiac Fiero is a perfect example. It came with sporty dreams, but what it delivered was smoke. Yes, literally. Here's the biggest problem: engine fires. The Fiero's engine was known for overheating and bursting into flames. It had a low-capacity oil pan, which often caused oil starvation. That led to overheating and damaged connecting rods. And when those rods broke, oil leaked straight onto the hot exhaust, and the result was only flames under the rear hatch. By the end of 1985, there were 112 fire reports, most from the 1984 version. And it gets worse. The car's electric panel was placed dangerously close to the exhaust manifold, making the fire risk even higher. That's like putting a matchbox next to a campfire and hoping for the best. The trouble didn't stop with the heat. The Fiero had manual steering, which made slow-speed driving a chore. It was meant to be a commuter car, but traffic felt like a gym workout. With the engine in the back and a light body, it was hard to keep steady when weaving through city streets. Then there's space. or the lack of it. There was little room for people or things. Talk about speed, the four-cylinder engine needed about 11 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Even the stronger V6 version didn't feel fast. Well, the shape turned heads, but that sharp look didn't match its weak performance. Fires, flaws, and frustrating drives defined the Fiero. Number 8, 1989 Dodge Shadow ES. The 1989 Dodge Shadow ES was packed with the problems. And once you drive it, the truth hits hard. Let's begin with the outside. It looked like it had a trunk, but it didn't. It was a hatchback with glass that didn't even open. Dodge called it hidden hatchback versatility, but it just confused everyone. The hatch wasn't strong either. Some would stop working in winter, leaving your groceries rolling around in the back seat. Under the hood, it had a 152 cubic inch turbo engine making 150 horsepower. But the turbo would heat up quickly and the car would lose power or even stall. And the 5-speed manual transmission, it felt rough and clunky, like shifting a lawnmower. Drivers had to fight the gear stick just to change gears. Brakes were another big problem. Some Shadow ES models had 4-wheel disc brakes, but they wore out fast. Worse, the back wheels could lock up during hard stops. That's not just bad, it's dangerous. Inside the car, Dodge tried to be fancy with features like power windows, cruise control, and a sunroof, but most of these broke after a few years. Buttons stopped working, windows got stuck, door locks jammed, even the light package, with lights in the glove box and trunk, didn't last. The dashboard had a vacuum and boost gauge, but hardly anyone understood it. The message center gave false alerts, blinking lights that made no sense. Not only this, but the build quality was awful. The car rattled on bumpy roads, plastic parts cracked, seats wore out, and the steering wheel felt cheap. The motorized seat belts added in 1994 were noisy, slow, and broke often. Number 7, 1980 Corvette 305, California. The 1980 Corvette 305 California was made only for California because of strict pollution laws. This version of the Corvette came with a smaller engine, a 305 cubic inch V8. That engine made just 180 horsepower. For a Corvette, that was a huge disappointment. Worse still, this engine was matched with a slow 3-speed automatic transmission. That combo made the car feel sluggish. It didn't take off with power. It crept forward like a fast scooter. This was a Corvette in name only, missing the speed and muscle that made earlier models famous. It never left California. That means it likely stayed away from bad weather, but it also didn't live the fast life a Corvette should. It became more of a pretty face than a performer. It had a shiny burgundy color all around, cool T-tops you could remove, and even fresh 18-inch aluminum wheels with wide tires. But no matter how sharp it looked, none of that helped it drive any better. Even though it kept its original engine and transmission, that didn't make the car special. The small engine and weak transmission kept it far behind other muscle cars of its time. There was no thrill, no roar, just quiet disappointment. Chevrolet had no real choice. They had to make a version that fit California's rules. But for fans who expected power and performance, this Corvette came up empty. It lost its strong reputation, and with it, everything that made the name Corvette exciting. Number 6, 1981 Mercury Capri Turbo RS. The 1981 Mercury Capri Turbo RS rolled out with more groans than glory. It had cool touches like a sharp front end and shiny alloy wheels. But once you got past the face, things fell apart fast. One of the biggest head scratchers? No standard air conditioning. On a warm day, the only relief came from rolling down the windows. That meant noise, wind, and sweat. Not exactly the comfort buyers expected in the early 1980s. Then came the real letdown. Power. The base engine was a 140 cubic inch 4-cylinder that made just 88 horsepower. Slow was an understatement. Even the 200 cubic inch 6-cylinder engine didn't do much better. And the so-called turbo version? Still based on that tiny 4-cylinder and still slow. It used a carburetor instead of fuel injection, so it felt old and clunky right out of the gate. Looks didn't help either. The body was square and bulky, with a thick C-pillar and oversized doors that gave it a heavy feel. The shiny trim around the windows made it look even more dated. It resembled the Ford Mustang, but without the Mustang's charm, speed, or fan base. There was some extra space in the back for tall items, which helped a little. But no one bought a sporty coupe just for vertical trunk room. By the mid-'80s, most buyers gave up on the Capri. Sales dropped, and in 1986, Mercury pulled the plug. What started with a promise ended in disappointment. The Mercury Capri Turbo RS never found its stride. It just lagged behind. Puffing out promises it. Number 5, 1980 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. The 1980 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. One of the biggest problems was its TH200 automatic transmission. When matched with the 231 cubic inch V6 engine, that transmission had a bad habit of failing early. This made the car unreliable and frustrating to own. Now about that engine. It had a turbocharged V6 borrowed from the Buick Riviera. So when you hit the gas from a stop, it didn't move quickly. There was a small delay that made it feel sleepy instead of sporty. And sometimes the turbo caused pinging or pre-ignition, which made the car run rough. It just wasn't a smooth or well-built setup. Then there was the way the Monte Carlo looked. The style didn't land well with most people. The shape was odd, and it didn't match the performance it promised. Chevrolet even added a bulge to the hood to make space for the turbocharger, but instead of looking powerful, it just looked strange and awkward. Despite this, the seats didn't help the experience. The split bench seats were made of cheap materials and didn't offer much support for your back or sides. The feel was flat and boring. The color scheme? Also plain and dull. Nothing about the layout made the ride more enjoyable. Even though the steering and suspension worked okay, they couldn't save the overall feel. The car stayed quiet on the road, but it felt like it was just floating, not really connected to the driver. And that disconnect made every trip in the Monte Carlo feel less fun, less exciting, and full of missed potential. Number 4, 1981 Pontiac Grand Prix. The 1981 Pontiac Grand Prix's new design was meant to cut down on air drag for better fuel use. But all it really did was make the car look plain and dull. It lost the bold look of the older models and didn't bring any new excitement. Under the hood, things didn't get better. The base engine was a Buick 231 cubic inch V6 that made only 110 horsepower. That's not much power for a car this size. Another choice was a Pontiac-built V8 with 262 cubic inches and just 120 horsepower. Even a 350 cubic inch diesel V8 was an option, but it only made 105 horsepower. No matter which engine you picked, none had the power you'd expect from something wearing the Grand Prix badge. Moreover, the cabin tried to impress with wood grain touches and soft seats, but they didn't fix the weak performance. Some versions came with a rally gauge cluster or a factory CB radio, but these were just small extras. Color options were plain, with names like dark maroon metallic and cameo white. The two-door coupe did offer optional T-tops, which gave a little breeze, but not much excitement. Also, the driving feel was lazy. It could handle bumps, sure, but it didn't corner with any sportiness. The V8 version took about 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. That's not thrilling, it's tiring. The exhaust made some noise, but it didn't match the speed. And since it shared so many parts with the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Buick Regal, it didn't stand out at all. Number 3, 1980 Ford Mustang Cobra. The 1980 Ford Mustang Cobra, under all the stripes and badging, was full of letdowns. First came the shrinking heart under the hood, 255 cubic inch V8 engine. It had less horsepower than the year before, with about 10 horsepower cut away. For a car wearing the Cobra name, that was a big letdown. Then came the 140 cubic inch turbocharged engine. Turbo sounds exciting, right? Not here. It had turbo lag so bad that drivers had to wait and wait before feeling any real push. At low speeds, it felt lazy. Even on the quarter mile, the car dragged itself forward with none of the Mustang magic fans expected. Beyond this, things got worse with reliability. The turbocharged engine had a habit of stalling. Turbochargers failed often, making repairs a constant worry. And the cooling system? That was another mess. It struggled to keep the engine cool. If the radiator or AC condenser got blocked even a little, overheating was right around the corner. You'd think the rest of the car could make up for the trouble, but it didn't. It had Recaro bucket seats, sure, but they were not enough. The rest of the space felt old and didn't match what people hoped for in a sports car. The overall feel just didn't deliver on the Mustang name. Ford tried to give the Cobra life in 1980, but the result was all show and no go. Number 2, 1984 Cadillac Cimarron. The 1984 Cadillac Cimarron promised luxury but delivered disappointment. It looked almost the same as the much cheaper Chevrolet Cavalier with just a new grille and Cadillac badges. Now, let's talk power. It started with a 121 cubic inch four-cylinder engine, then later added a 173 cubic inch V6. Neither had much power. The top speed was only about 105 miles per hour, and it took around 13 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. That's way too slow for a Cadillac. Cadillac engineers worked on the suspension, using firmer struts and softer springs. They added anti-roll bars from sportier J cars to help the car handle better. But even with those changes, the ride still didn't feel smooth or high class. The steering and brakes were just average, nothing special. Further, some fancy touches were added, like a power sunroof and an optional Delco GM Bose sound system. That sound system was rare for small cars back then, but it wasn't enough to make a real difference. It came as a four-door sedan in colors like cotillion white and sable black. But those details didn't hide the car's basic roots. Plus, the Cimarron had electronic fuel injection, which was a good feature for its time. But it still used the same engines and transmissions as other J-platform cars, a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic. Nothing unique there. Cadillac hoped younger drivers would buy it, but most buyers were older or already owned Cadillacs. Today, the Cimarron's value is low between $1,000 and $5,000. The name Cimarron is now mostly remembered for what went wrong. Number 1, 1981 Oldsmobile Omega. The 1981 Oldsmobile Omega was built on the GM X-body platform, the same one used for the Chevrolet Citation and Pontiac Phoenix, both known for their problems. That already gave the Omega a rough start. Under the surface, it had a Chevrolet 170 cubic inch two-barrel V6 engine with a turbocharger from Japan's Ishikawajima Harima Heavy Industries. It came with upgrades like a larger oil pan, improved exhaust, and a special carburetor. But even with all that, the power still felt low. The engine stayed paired with a slow 3-speed automatic transmission, which made everything feel sluggish and outdated. Some work was done to the suspension, like a thicker 1.25-inch front anti-roll bar and stiffer springs. Still, it used McPherson struts in front and a beam axle with a trailing link in the back. This setup didn't help much. The power rack and pinion steering and front disc brakes with rear drums were mostly standard, so turning and stopping didn't feel sharp or confident. In addition, it tried to look fancy with Recaro bucket seats in black and tan cloth, but the rest of the space felt plain, worn, and cheap. There were a few extra gauges and wiring for racing use, but things like the sagging headliner and tired carpet made it feel unfinished. On the outside, it had a fiberglass front, an air dam, flares, a spoiler, and golden brown paint with race stickers. But the paint looked uneven, and the style felt forced. Later, it was even repainted badly. This car tried to be a pace car, but it never found its pace. Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more car stories.